Well, hello there. Go ahead and take a seat, handsome. I'll be right with you. The last time I saw you, we had just conquered Wales as well as a fraction of Ireland, and we had also formed our very own independent Ireland as well, in something of a revolution against our French benefactors. Naturally, as one might imagine, they were none too pleased with us leaving and rebelling against them, and thus we are at war with them. That's not much of a problem though, as they currently still control our beautiful Tralee castle, and we plan on taking it back. But first, since we are our very own nation now, it seems fitting that we would have a banner befitting a new nation. I wanted to do the Irish flag, but unfortunately I couldn't change the color of my banner background, so I just settled for an upgraded version. I also thought it best that we go ahead and ditch our blue French uniform and swap it out for more of an emerald lucky green. I would also purchase a heavy executioner's axe, putting away the double sword that was provided to us by King Louis. I have chosen this specific axe because for those who decide to stand in my way of liberating Ireland, I shall be their judge, jury, and executioner. First things first though, we're going to begin heading back to Ireland from Wales so that we may try to siege Tralee Castle. We still currently have the massive force that we had raised to take Galway last episode before our plans were ruined by the King of France. No matter, he won't be able to stop me this time. It's been a long time, Tralee Castle. I'm glad to see that you've been taken care of in my absence. Sad to think only a few short days ago we would have been fighting alongside these men, not against them. But things change quite quickly in this day and age, and if they're willing to stand against us, then they will fall to us. Riding in on horseback, I would lead my valiant brave soldiers against this castle once more, for what I truly hope is the final time. We would begin bringing both towers as well as our battering ram near the castle walls. We already severely outnumbered the castle's defenders, and with these multiple avenues of being able to get inside the walls, we should be able to easily take this fortification. And so we did. Before I even had a chance to kill a single defender inside the castle's walls, we had already defeated every single one of them. And victory was ours once more. Tralee Castle finally back in the hands of a true Irishman and a true Irish government. I would have the majority of our forces stay here at the castle to not only defend it, but this way as well I'm not having to pay so much for their upkeep as well as their food and travel expenses. Speaking of which, we would end up traveling to Galway and staying in a tavern for the night, not only to celebrate our great victory, but to also hear the public opinions of the populace. I believe these lands and cities are truly ripe for a rebellion. I would also end up hiring some light infantry troops for my spouse. For you see, I am going to give her a party of soldiers of her own. Since we're our own nation now, it only makes sense from a financial and logical standpoint. Good luck and Godspeed out there, my love. Now that she and Sven are keeping our Irish territory safe, I would begin making my way back to Wales. We had many a French force here trying to take over our lands, but we wouldn't allow that. Just call me the old head splitter, eh? And we would continue pushing our former allies away from our lands. We had eventually stumbled upon the party of Lord Louis Dubuisson. Sad to think that we had served together in so many battles, and yet here he is, standing against me today. But I'm afraid I couldn't let anyone, not even my friends, stand in the way of my destiny. Especially not my friends, come to think of it. Wielding my mighty axe, I would execute many of Louis's men here on the battlefield today. I began to wonder, though, if maybe I should make an example out of Louis himself. Executing him perhaps would show the others that I'm not taking any mercy on them, regardless of whether or not we're friends. I would first speak with him, though, and ask him if he would disown his king and join us here. As to be expected, though, he would refuse. I had a choice now. Show the world that I am a ruthless, merciless warlord who will do whatever it takes to liberate his country or spare a friend. As his head hung in silence, waiting for my axe to come down upon it, I began to ponder about the oppression and subjugation that my people have faced this whole time. Am I really so far gone that I would act out the same cruelties to those who once called themselves my allies? No, I am better than this. I am better than that. We may be at war, yes, but we are simply enemies of circumstance. If we can continue defeating their armies in England and Wales, we can force the French to make peace with us without killing our friends. Besides, as we already know, taking them prisoner instead is much better for us financially. I will say though, one of the best parts about being one of the largest French armies in England at the time when we decided to rebel means that there are hardly any other armies that can challenge us. Well, other than the large army of Marie Anne. She too, once an ally, made enemy through this war. No doubt she will not make this easy on us. Her troops were brave and they had gumption, but most concerning of all, they had experience. Her riflemen damn near made it impossible for me to get a shot in at them, so instead I would resort to my axe. This battle in particular was long and very difficult. The only advantage that we had here was sheer numbers. But at the end of the day, that was all that it took to turn the odds in our favor. With the crushing defeat of their largest army on this side of the sea, King Louis would be forced to make peace with us, paying us a considerable tribute every day. This was indeed in his best interest as well, because he was also still at war with Great Britain and had just recently entered a war with Spain. Hopefully, our two nations can prosper together in the future. As a show of good faith, I decided to travel to London and enter a tournament. Okay, as a show of good faith, and also because I love tournaments. Nothing like a good duel, eh? Now that we're finally at peace with France, though, we would have no trouble traveling through their territories to try and make our way out east. For multiple reasons. One, I've never traveled this far east, and two, I was hoping to possibly find some great allies out here. There's a great chance of finding a rough and tough German companion here at Hamburg, but the real task will be not getting lost in this snowy, gorgeous city. Now personally, I didn't speak German, but lucky enough for me, most of the townsfolk knew a little bit of French. I would begin asking around about some loyal soldiers to stand by my side. I did come upon a small group of inscripted people who were going to be joining the army, which was promising, but I need someone with some experience. I ended up taking a wrong turn down a bad alley though, and I was intercepted by a thug. The bastard and his friends tried shaking me down, but as you could imagine, that didn't go too well for them. Normally, I try not to spill any blood in foreign cities if I can help it, but being the Emperor of Ireland, I think I'll get a pass. Besides, they started it. The lands and waterways truly are beautiful here as well, and I had a great view just outside the inn that I was staying at. Speaking of which, staying at the inn alongside me was Owain the Red, a mighty warrior with, well, a red beard and hair, though I'm not exactly sure if that's how he achieved his name. Nevertheless, he told many tales and claimed to be a very skilled warrior, so I decided to hire him as my second. But don't get your panties in a twist just yet. Yes, he seems like a mercenary, but he may be worthy of trust and very well may be worthy of the battlefield. But that is yet to be determined. To try and help us determine this, I decided to take him to the city of Krakow, where we would enter a tournament together. Thankfully, he would be on an enemy team, so we would be able to judge it for ourselves firsthand. He held his own for quite a while, but I must say for someone with such big talk and such tall tales, he didn't perform exactly as I had expected. A tournament isn't the same as a real battlefield though. Let's see how he handles himself with a couple of bandits trying to cut his head off. I must say, all these wars lately, I really miss the days of us just slaying bandits and sea pirates. Oh, and Owain the Red actually done quite well during this battle, and I think he is ready to govern a very small party of his own. By this point, we were headed all the way back home, as the French had made peace with Spain, and I had a fear that they would also make peace with the British before we had the opportunity to declare war. On our way back, we'd stopped in nearby London, and we would actually meet with Lady Elizabeth Charlotte. She was someone we knew quite well, and thus I wanted to try to request her support. After much conversation and much persuasion, unfortunately, she remained unfazed. Nevertheless, though, we would continue forward, giving Owain the Red his very own party to command. Only about 40 or so soldiers, though, of course, since he's new around these parts. He'll need to continue proving himself to us throughout this, but that comes with time, of course. I would personally travel back to Tralee Castle, where I would gather many troops from the garrison there to supply my own army, swelling my ranks to 137 soldiers strong. This wasn't anything extravagant, but it is a start. But my friends, it is now truly finally time, the true and final liberation of Ireland. We no longer declare wars under another nation's banners, we declare them under our own. Perfect timing as well, it would seem, as they are still currently at war with France. Perhaps King Louis will be able to keep them busy over there while we take over Ireland. And so it begins. For our strategy at taking over the Emerald Isle, we're going to be going on the offensive quite a bit here. This way, some of our companions, such as my beautiful wife here and her massive army, may end up taking somewhere like Galway or Waterford without our assistance. Hopefully before she and her troops send our new nation into crippling debt. Going to war and taking down our enemies is always the fun part, but trying to figure out the economy, not so much. Financially though, it helps us out quite a bit when we encounter an army the size of Arthur's here and we're able to defeat them and sell all of their gear. Ah, Arthur, we've had many a battle against one another, but this shall be our last. One way or another, our little feud ends here in this swampy place. Your men against my own, you homicidal fool. We had damn near identical numbers, but the terrain was in our favor. I had positioned my riflemen atop a hill facing down towards the swamp where Arthur's army lay. It wouldn't be long at all before we could see his horsemen riding up towards the hill. We began opening up an absolutely massive line of fire towards them, stretching over numerous amounts of these cliffs. Of course, though, I couldn't leave my men hanging. Every good general and or emperor gets his hands dirty in the battlefield. Many of Arthur's horsemen had fallen to my mighty axe already, so I had my riflemen move up in an aggressive formation. I would hang back with them for a time and fire at our enemies as well. The enemy army was dwindling down to a husk of what it was before. Those few enemy horsemen and riflemen that did remain alive had been easily overcome by our forces, and with that, my friends, we had finally won, leaving behind nothing more than a marsh full of enemy corpses. I'm afraid that Arthur wasn't near as lucky as his men who died there in that swamp, and he had survived the battle. I would indeed look to make an example of him, but before I decided to execute him, I wanted to give him one last chance to join us and our rebellion. I'm afraid, though, that after much conversation and multiple attempts to explain my side to him, he was unfazed. Poor Arthur, you have made a gargantuan mistake here today in your judgment. I would have expected more from a mighty warrior such as yourself, more sense from you at least. I'm sure your king appreciates your dedication and loyalty, Arthur, but it does nothing but hinder me. These games end here, as does your legacy. As I'm sure you might imagine, with Arthur's execution, many of the British lords were quite upset, such as Lord Henry here, who wasn't all that happy to see me, to say the least. Well, old boy, it's a good thing I didn't come for a tea party or to have a little soiree socializing with you. Not to worry, though, you're hardly a threat to me, so you won't be facing the same fate as your comrade. You're worth much more to me alive than you ever would be dead. As a matter of fact, many of the British lords would not be facing the same fate as Arthur, of course. I don't want the other world leaders thinking I'm a homicidal maniac warlord of Ireland. No, no. Instead, I would keep many of the lords that we had defeated in Tralee Castle as prisoners until after the war is over. This way they can't continue raising armies against us. Speaking of which, by this point, my wife had raised quite the army herself, and I decided to speak with her and see if she might loan me a few troops here and there. You know, not too many, maybe just several or a couple here and there, or yeah, maybe about 800 or so. I think that'll do nicely. The reason for my leading this gigantic army is because I plan on sieging Galway. The King of France may have foiled my plans to liberate this fine city once before, but today he is nowhere to be found. Ah, Galway, your beautiful city walls. I had last been here when I was but a wee lad. Funny, when I was so small, these city walls used to make me feel so safe and snugly warm. Now my enemies sit atop them. I am afraid to say that we hadn't managed to take out their artillery or crack the city walls with our cannons, so hopefully our siege towers, battering ram, and our manpower in general will be enough. I would personally help out our artillerymen to ensure that we're hitting the proper targets with our cannons. They seem to have things under control though, so I would begin pushing forward with the men, sniping many a rifleman atop these mighty towers. As the battle raged on, I realized that we had already lost both of our siege towers. The only hope now would be our battering ram. And truly hope was all we had, as our enemies were dug in deep. The task of rooting them all out of the city would be damn near impossible. But my faith was still strong, as it wouldn't be the first time we've pulled off a miracle. But it was time for us to break down these gates and break the chokehold that they had upon the city. Once we get those gates down, our infantrymen will be able to flood through the city, killing all the British within. A task that is much easier said than done, true, but one that we would attempt to accomplish nonetheless. I would stand by my men every step of the way, even the bloodbath that was within the corridor. We were packed in as tight as can be. My large axe was no use within these confines, so I would find a saber upon the ground, slashing many a man to his end. Eventually, though, I and my men within the corridor were completely overwhelmed, and I was downed. With some quick thinking from my soldiers, they would pull me up by the bootstraps and begin a retreat away from the city. We had failed, and the city was still under the control of the British. We had barely made any type of dent in the garrison of the city. We would have to retreat and regroup, as well as rest and heal ourselves for a few days. Though I must say it was incredibly hard to find the time to rest, as we were continuously having to try to chase the British out of our lands. We were constantly getting into many a large skirmish, as many of our men were still very injured. Nevertheless, with our wit and know-how, we would still end up winning these battles, thankfully. We would also end up taking prisoner Ladies Catherine and Elizabeth, both of which being very close vassals to the king and very experienced generals. I'm afraid, ladies, that your heads must roll. As you might imagine, word began to really spread about my merciless executions. In these lands, I was becoming known as Irish the Butcher, the one true Emperor of Ireland. Fitting. After some time, when the majority of my men were finally healed up, I decided to stop in over at Schligeck Castle. I would end up pulling many men from the garrison. Now, this may seem like a stupid move, and very well it could be, but I needed men to help me take Galway once and for all. None of us shall truly be free until we are all free. This time around, we had packed enough food to do our men for many months on end. This would be absolutely crucial and vital to taking the city, as this meant we could build as many cannons as need be, put them in our reserves, and then bring them back out onto the front line once the enemy's defenses were down, giving us the upper hand and allowing us to crack the city walls, leaving large gaps in them for our men to go through, which should indeed make it quite easy to infiltrate the city. Not to worry, my fine friends of Galway, this time I shall not fail. I, mounted on my horse, would personally lead the charge through one of the mighty cracks in these mighty Irish walls, personally overseeing the absolute destruction of the city's garrison. And with my mighty axe, I would cast several of these bastards straight into the abyss of hell. My ancestors were with me, smiling upon me on this glorious day. I sat atop my horse like the mighty Reaper himself, taking souls. Nothing would stop me, for my destiny is etched into the universe itself. This is what I was born for. We are the mighty conquering liberators of Galway, flooding throughout the city streets. Those who oppose us will perish and be tossed from atop the city's towers, for these walls were made by Irish hands and they belong to Irish hands. We would continue pushing further and further into the city streets, spearheading a mighty assault against the British. After hours of exhausting battle and several gallons upon gallons of blood spilled, Galway was liberated and under our control. Finally, we've taken it, marking not only the first city that we've taken by ourselves with our very own army, but the first Irish city. Yet another step closer to the entire country. Even with my extensive wounds from the bloodbath that was the siege of Galway, I managed to find the strength to get myself up out of bed and have a stroll through the town. Sure, things were a bit gloomy after the liberation because of all the damage done to the city, but the resolve and strength of these fine people was on full display. Friendly faces everywhere. Celebrations were taking place where people were literally playing music and dancing in the streets, happy about their independence. I can't begin to tell you how much it warmed my heart to see these celebrations taking place, but also to be the sole reason that they're even happening. If only my father could see me now. Sitting atop the Lord's throne in Galway was indeed nice. We have come so far, but there was still so much work left for us to do. Our sweet country and kinsmen are one step closer to our ultimate goal of a free and independent, truly independent Ireland. Even so, though, we do still have an entire half a country to liberate. All within due time, of course. Until next time, my friends.